We're going to talk about an expansion to the QIO series of input and output devices for a Q-SYS. If you are not familiar with the QIO series already, we need to get analog inputs and outputs into the system, obviously. We announced the Core 24F in our last Activate, as well as the X-Class server cores. And that X-Class is specifically a networked-based core, which means that you definitely don't have any inputs and outputs on the back of that device. You are going to need to use something like the QIO boxes in order to bring in your analog inputs, send out your analog outputs, bring in GPIO, things like that. You should be familiar with these already. These boxes right there, those are the ones you are familiar with. They have a couple of advantages to them. They're very small. They can be located close to the device that you're bringing in or sending out. They also have daisy chain PoE ability. One LAN in and the other one can string to the next one. That's very useful for the edge of your network on the periphery. However, with larger network channel counts, you also have the need for higher density input and output. So the expansion to this series that we're announcing today are new higher density devices for the QIO series. We have 3 of them lining up behind me. These will all allow you to go beyond and build larger systems more efficiently by having more of those inputs and outputs compacted into a single device. We have these new devices right here, the ML24i, that is a 24 input QIO series. The L24o is 24 outputs, and then the QIO-24f. That has 8 dedicated inputs, 8 dedicated outputs, and then 8 flex channels that can be used as either inputs or outputs. That nomenclature very similar to the Core 24F, which has those very same similar inputs and outputs on the back. All 3 of these devices have GPIO 8x8 on them as well, so if you do need to control any of those analog devices as they're coming in and coming out, you have the GPIO to control them as well, without having to add an additional QIO like GP 8x8. That is all located right in this same area. Now, obviously, these are a 1 RU device. These are intended to live in the rack, probably near your core, when you are consolidating all of that audio density into a single place. And that is the goal for these, right? And because of that, because this is probably going to live in the rack, it's going to be powered not by PoE, but with a standard power cable. And that allows us actually to do some redundancy options that we weren't doing with the other QIO devices. So we now have the ability, much like any other network device that is operating in redundant mode, these QIO devices operate in redundancy mode as well. So if you have all of your inputs and they're going into the first device, if that device suffers any sort of failure, it detects that there's a fault of some kind, it needs to swap over to the redundant device. That'll be a very, very short changeover as the secondary device comes online and the primary passes everything on over to that secondary one. Now, I know what you're thinking. If you're like me, that means, great, you get to spend a lot of time in the rack room splicing wires and making sure that every input goes to that one and to that one as well. And you got to strip those cables and spend so much time with your little screwdriver. Fortunately, we've got a little accessory that will help you out in that regard. This accessory automatically wires everything in parallel from the primary device to the secondary device. So you only need to strip your wires once and connect them to that very first connector. And then we've got this block that will automatically just go down and connect to the second one. That'll make your life just a little bit easier and is a good little quality of life that will help things out.
All right. Nate, why don't you take us through what that looks like on a design?
Sure, let's throw up this design up here so that everyone can see it. This is a diagram of a typical courtroom where this may be a useful device to insert. Here you see a whole lot of inputs and outputs. We're using the Core X10 processor, which means we need some analog input and output connections. I see a lot of wall plates in this room bringing in audio. I see a lot of loudspeakers that are being fed by an analog amplifier. So maybe this was a system that was already up and running. We retrofitted it, but we didn't want to pull out and replace with network amplifiers. So we need a high density amount of inputs and outputs. So this is a perfect situation for a more complex room that will really take that 24O and the 24i and be very, very useful to fill it all of its needs.